Air dry clay is a fantastic craft medium and there are so many different projects we can create with it. Recently I've been experimenting quite a bit with my air dry clay, and have you seen the technique with polymer clay where we can make polymer clay into some quartz or fake stone? Air dry clay works really quite differently, so I've developed this little technique to make some faux quartz. I've rolled the clay into a coil and then cutting it into some small sections. Here I have about 300 grams of air dry clay. I've tried to use what we might have at home for this, and I'm sure you all have a pencil, or if you have a graphite stick, that's great too. Taking a knife, I release some of the graphite like this. Don't worry if you don't have a graphite stick like this, keep sharpening your pencil and keep releasing some of that black dust. This is a piece of charcoal and I'm doing the same with this, moving around and trying to coat the top of all of this air dry clay. Here I have a black oil pastel and I'm taking some shards of this off and releasing this on top, and that just releases bigger chunks and it's quite nice to have a bit of variation like that. I wanted mine to be black and white, but feel free to make it as colourful as you wish. Very gently with the tips of my fingers I'm rolling these over to cover them. For a little contrast with the black, I'm adding just a bit of gold glitter and a tiny bit of gold leaf. Now I want to take all of the air dry clay and bunch it together to make a nice solid block. Rather than smoothing it together, make sure you just press it and compress it together. When we cut this, don't expect it to be the same as polymer clay. The softer nature of the clay makes it blend more easily, so what I do is I cut my edges like this. As on the outside, I find we really keep that texture, but we can use it all and I'll show you how I piece this together. I recommend that you put down a piece of baking parchment as you lay these down, so that we can roll these and that we're able to turn it easier. I lay a loose kind of tiled pattern, mixing up the inside and the outside pieces. Then once it's all cut and placed, we can add a few more flicks of the black or your colour. When you put gold leaf within air dry clay, it really does tend to swallow it up and you don't really tend to see it much anymore, so I'm going to add just a few flashes of the gold leaf on top. Make sure this is on parchment or greaseproof paper and then start to roll. And as I roll, I love to see how the pattern emerges. Depending on the shape you're after, you can do a bit of a jigsaw puzzle like I did there. I really love how it's starting to turn out, and every time you do it, it will be that little bit different. Have a think about what you'd like to turn yours into. I'm going to turn mine into a paint palette. I've rolled mine really quite thin as I'm going to add some resin to this, but if you want yours a bit thicker, just go thicker when you roll it. You could always add some white clay underneath and then roll again. I'm just using a table knife to score where I want to cut, and then I run round and I can cut this very easily like this. A sharp needle also cuts the clay really quite easily, and it allows you to get into some corners that you can't do with a knife. This is quite a large piece, so I do recommend when you do this for the first time, make some smaller items and see how you get on. I normally roll my clay out on a smooth tile, but this time I've used a piece of perspex, but don't you forget to put some greaseproof paper or parchment underneath. This air dry clay is really thin, so should only take about 24 hours to dry. Just make sure it is 100% dry before we add any resin. That time has now passed, and you guessed it, the first one that I did absolutely stuck to the acrylic sheet. I don't think it would have stuck to my tile, but you never know, so I've rolled out another and put it on some parchment paper. It's all a learning curve, but don't worry, I'll recycle that clay that got stuck. Take a look at my video if you need to recycle any air dry clay. The leftover clay from the edges I'm going to make into some items as well, and I have lots of these silicone moulds, like the silicone palette that I'm also using. If you want the link to any of these, I'll put them in the description below. It's been the 24 hours and this is now fully dry, it's completely bone dry, and I can add some resin. Make sure to wear all the protective equipment when it comes to using resin. These silicone moulds really are fantastic, and I can't wait to make lots of different creations with them. And I look forward to making a faux quartz chopping board. I'm using a 2-part epoxy resin for this. Measure equal parts of A and B by weight. For all my preferred items and products that I use, I'll put the link in the description below. I have a heat mat here, and this just speeds up the process when working with resin. I stir the resin together and the heat allows the bubbles to release. I start to pour this out as the bubbles will release quicker on this larger surface. Pour nice and high in a nice thin stream. I'm not on quite an even surface here, so it's not going quite level, but I do have a little tool that I use to help this level, and I'll show you that in a minute. I've not done this with something so large before, and so as I put this in, yes, my air dry clay has shrunk quite a bit, and yes, are we going to get some bubbles underneath there? Do tell me in the comments below if you have a way to get rid of lots of those bubbles. I'm giving it a good jiggle and a good shake, and then releasing it with the heat mat. Then I gently took it over to my level board, which makes it all nice and level, and put my speed curer on the top, adding some more resin to top it up. If you don't have a speed dryer, just let it dry for the required time. One of the most satisfying bits, releasing that mould, and you can see what you think. Yes, the air dry clay did shrink and it didn't fill that, so if we did that again, we could work out how to fill that mould a bit better, but I love how it's turned out, I really do. And the air dry clay and resin I love working with together, and I hope you have a go at making some faux quartz out of air dry clay, and this has inspired you to do lots of creative projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.